Welcome back to the Awesome Agents podcast. So today we're talking about the US government potentially capping how many Nvidia H200 chips Chinese companies can buy. And the number being floated is 75,000 per customer.
Right. And on paper, that sounds like a lot of chips. But context matters here. Alibaba and ByteDance have each told Nvidia they need way more than that. Chinese companies collectively ordered over 2 million H200s for 2026.
2 million. So 75,000 is basically a fraction of what they actually want.
Exactly. And here's the thing that really jumped out to me. 0 H200 chips have actually shipped to China so far. Not one.
Wait, seriously? They have these export approvals on paper, but nothing has physically moved?
Nothing. The Commerce Department confirmed it in late February. Nvidia got a license for a small amount, but it's unclear if Beijing will even let the shipments through on their end.
So we are debating caps on something that isn't even flowing yet. That's kind of surreal.
It is. And Nvidia has already excluded China data center revenue from their first quarter outlook because of this uncertainty. They're not even counting on it.
Okay, so help me understand the technical picture. Why do Chinese companies want the H200 so badly? Don't they have their own chips?
They do. Huawei makes the Ascend 910C, which is their best chip right now. But DeepSeek's own testing found it performs at roughly 60% of the H100 level, and the H200 is faster than the H100. So there's still a real performance gap.
So the H200 has 141 gigabytes of HBM3E memory running at 4.8 terabytes per second. How does that compare?
The Ascend 910C has 64 gigs of older HBM2E at 3.2 terabytes per second. So the H200 has more than double the memory and clearly more bandwidth. For training frontier models, that gap is huge.
And AMD's MI325X counts toward the same cap, right?
It does, which is interesting because the MI325X actually has 288 gigs of HBM3E and 6 terabytes per second bandwidth. So it's arguably even more capable for certain workloads, but it all counts toward that 75,000 limit.
Now here is what I find fascinating. DeepSeek is already building its next model V4 completely without Nvidia or AMD chips. They're optimizing for Huawei and Cambricon hardware instead.
Right, that's the really strategic move here. They're basically saying we cannot assume US chips will always be available, so we are designing around that reality now. It's a hedge that could reshape the whole supply chain.
So the caps might actually be accelerating the thing they are trying to prevent.
That's exactly what the Council on Foreign Relations argued. They called the whole export framework, and I'm quoting here, strategically incoherent. Their analysis estimated that allowing 1 million H200s into China could increase domestic AI compute by 250% annually.
And the companies likely buying them, Alibaba, Tencent, DeepSeek, all have documented ties to China's military. Tencent is literally designated as a Chinese military company by the Pentagon.
Right. So you have this contradiction where the regulation admits the national security risk exists, but then creates a pathway to sell anyway. That's what the CFR was pointing at.
Meanwhile, China's National People's Congress just opened with a 5-year plan that puts $70 billion in semiconductor subsidies at the center. They are building alternatives regardless.
Exactly. The Huawei Atlas 950, which just debuted at MWC Barcelona, is specifically designed to close that performance gap. If it delivers when it ships later this year, the leverage shifts dramatically.
So what should people be watching for in the next few months?
3 things. First, do any H200s actually cross the border? Approval on paper means nothing until silicon ships. Second, does Huawei deliver competitive hardware on schedule? And third, watch NVIDIA's revenue guidance. If the cap holds, you can calculate a ceiling on China revenue, and it is well below what Wall Street priced in.
So this is basically a three-way chess game between Washington, Beijing, and the chip makers stuck in the middle.
And each player is making moves that could backfire. Washington constrains supply but might push China to build self sufficiency faster. China builds alternatives, but they are not competitive yet. And NVIDIA holds licenses for chips that might never move.
The needle keeps getting narrower. All right, that's a great place to leave it. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
See you next time.